Circe. Great read. I'm not a reader. I love it. And why are you here? Because you're going to see a weaving demonstration by Lisa Doucette. Now, Lisa has come to weaving, as she said, later on. She's only been a weaver for 7 years. She was a member of the American Textile Museum. That's actually where she learned, at the American Textile Museum in Lowell. She's a member of the Rhode Island Weavers and the Boston Weavers, and she's going to show you some simple looms, a rigid heddle, an inkle, a tapestry, a tablet loom. And why is she doing it? Related to the big read. Because Circe was banished to an island, and she used weaving to occupy her time, among other things. As if you read the book, know, she did other things. We have copies of the book here, if you want to grab one on the way out. And I must tell you, Circe was sponsored by NEA Big Read. It's a program of the National Endowment of Arts in partnerships with Arts Midwest. So I see some folks coming in, so they missed my introduction, but they're lost. So Lisa's going to take over. Have a great time.
Thank you. Hi. My name is Lisa Doucette, and I've been a weaver for the past 7 years. And today I'll be giving a presentation that includes a brief history of weaving as it pertains to ancient Greece and also our local area, and an overview of weaving and weaving terms. I'll be demonstrating 4 types of simple looms that I own have brought with me, and I'll be showing some examples of my weaving over the years. So if you pay attention to the screen, the invention of clothing and textile ranks along with the development of agriculture and cooking and ceramics as one of the keystone events in the development of human culture. The wearing of clothing is exclusively a human characteristic and is a feature of most human societies. Men and women began wearing clothes after the last ice age. Evidence suggests that humans may have begun wearing clothing as far back as 100,000 to 500,000 years ago. And weaving is one of the oldest fiber technologies going back tens of thousands of years. There are not many examples of ancient woven cloth because woven cloth is very fragile. But recently, in 2017, archaeological excavations in an ancient cave in the Caucasus Mountains of modern-day Republic of Georgia have unearthed flax fibers thought to be more than 34,000 years old. Scientists say the discovery represents the oldest samples of cloth and thread known to have been used by humans. And while I was researching weaving in ancient Greece, I came upon a website about women in antiquity. It had an article about spinning and weaving in ancient Greece, from which I learned that spinning and weaving were important tasks for the vast majority of women in ancient Greece. Both were a major part of the labor that the typical woman was expected to perform. And the primary form of surviving evidence for spinning and weaving, depictions of spinners and weavers, supports the important role that textile production played in the lives and the roles of women. And here we have Penelope at her loom with Telemachus featured on a skyphos from 5th century BC. And a skyphos is an ancient Greek 2-handled deep bowl drinking cup. Then they used it for drinking wine, lots and lots of wine. So the depiction of goddesses and heroic mythological mortal women as weavers and spinners indicates how important spinning and weaving must have been to be such a major part of religious text and practice. And I found that of the major gods and goddesses, Athena was also the goddess of women's handicrafts, being the most important as they are with her in several prominent myths and in imagery. In fact, Athena's weaving skills are mentioned in passing on page 155 of Circe. And this is actually one of my favorite weaving references. If I had had Athena's skill, I could have woven a great tapestry of Iris, goddess of the rainbow, flinging down her colors from the sky. But I was not Athena. I was happy with simple scarves, with cloaks and blankets that lay chairs. And I did actually find something with Circe on it, so archaeological evidence for textile production includes the implements of spinning and weaving that survive, as well as images of spinners and weavers. And these, along with the literary depictions, as in myths, provide proof that ancient Greek weaving was very similar to surviving practices today. And this is a warp-weighted loom. As seen in the depictions on the Greek pottery in the last few slides, warp-weighted looms were used in ancient Greece. And this warp-weighted loom is a simple and ancient form of loom in which the warp yarns, which are the vertical yarns, hang freely from a bar supported by upright poles, which can be placed at a convenient slant against the wall. Bundles of warp threads are tied to hanging weights called loom weights, which keep the threads under tension. And evidence of warp-weighted loom appears approximately 10,000 to 3,700 BC in Central Europe. And warp-weighted looms were commonplace in Europe before the introduction of horizontal looms in the 10th and 11th centuries. And warp-weighted looms remain in use in Scandinavia into modern times. And I would be remiss if I did not at least mention the importance of weaving and the textile industry in the history of our area. We are, after all, in the Industrial Museum. I'm sure most of you have heard of Slater Mill in Pawtucket, Rhode Island. But are you aware that Samuel Slater was an early English-American industrialist known as the father of the American Industrial Revolution and the father of the American factory system? Slater established his first mill in 1790 on the Blackstone River in Rhode Island. It was one of the first factories in the United States. 3 years later, in Pawtucket, he built Slater Mill, the first American factory to successfully produce cotton yarn with water-powered machines. And this invention revolutionized the textile industry and was important for the Industrial Revolution. And the cotton mills in Massachusetts, Francis Cabot Lowell, an Newburyport native who formed the Boston Manufacturing Company, which later became the Boston Associates, established his first mill in Waltham in 1813. Lowell's mill used new types of technology such as water-driven power loom and hired young adult women known as mill girls to run equipment instead of children. The mill also did all of its manufacturing under one roof, with raw cotton entering at one end of the factory and finished cloth leaving at the other end. This type of manufacturing and labor management later became known as the Lowell system, and it completely revolutionized textile manufacturing at the time, making it more efficient and cost-effective and less dehumanizing for its workers. After Lowell passed away from an illness in 1817, the Boston Associates opened a new and much larger mill town and named it Lowell. It was the first large-scale mill town in America and was hugely successful. And due to Lowell's success, many new mills and mill towns just like it began sprouting up along rivers across Massachusetts and New England. Around 45 mill towns were established during the Industrial Revolution just in Massachusetts alone, including Attleboro, Taunton, New Bedford, and Fall River. In fact, this museum has a display just outside this room of the cotton mills of Attleboro. It's a nice little display. And now I'm going to onto some weaving terminology to help you better understand what I'll be talking about when I demonstrate weaving in the various looms I brought with me today. So weaving is a method of textile production in which two sets of yarns or threads are interlaced at right angles to form a fabric or cloth. They're called the warp and the weft. They're the two components used in weaving to turn it into cloth. The lengthwise warp yarns are held stationary in tension on a frame or a loom, and the weft is drawn through and inserted over and under the warp. Oops, there we go. The weft is a set of horizontal or widthwise threads, and it runs parallel to each other and at a right angle to the warp. And a shuttle is a tool designed to neatly and compactly hold the weft threads while weaving with the loom. Shuttles are thrown or passed back and forth through the shed between the warp threads in order to interlace the threads of the warp and weft in order to make cloth. Shuttles come in a variety of shapes and sizes for different types of weaving. Stick shuttles, shown on the right side, are usually for rigid heddle or band weaving looms, and boat shuttles on the left are usually used with larger floor looms. The shed. It's a V-shaped opening in the warp threads created by lifting or dropping some of the threads for the purpose of interlacing the weft threads. Different looms have different ways of making a shed, either through some sort of mechanism or some you manipulate by your hand, by just putting the threads in by hand. And then heddles, there's lots of terminology here, but it hopefully will make sense at the end. Heddles select the warp threads that the loom raises or lowers to make the shed for the shuttle to pass through. Heddles can be made out of various materials depending on what type of loom is being used. And on the pictures, the inkle on the left uses string heddles, which I have an example of, and the other one is a rigid heddle, and the rigid heddles are made out of plastic. And a beater is a weaving tool designed to push the weft yarn securely into place. In band weaving, such as inkle weaving and tablet weaving, the beater may be combined with the shuttle into a single tool, as shown in the photo on the left. Hand beaters, as shown in the middle photo, are usually used in tapestry weaving, and they have to have enough force, enough mass to force the weaving into place. So sometimes they're actually weighted with lead. So they provide extra heft for the beater, and sometimes they're made of metal too. And then loom beaters, as shown on the photo on the right, typically take the form of a bar mounted across the loom, and the actual beating is done by that metal insert known as a reed, which also spaces the warp threads. This is what you usually find on a floor loom or a big mechanized loom, is a beater with a reed. And this brings me to the need for different types of looms. And balance is the relationship between the number of warp threads and weft threads. If there's the same number of warp and weft, it's said to be a balanced weave. You can see both the warp and the weft threads. So on here you could see both like the white vertical threads and then the red going across as the weft. This is the kind of weaving you typically find on a rigid heddle or floor loom. And then weft-faced weave is when the weft covers the entire warp and you can't see the warp at all. Textile is said to be weft-faced. So you can see the warp threads up above in the picture are the vertical threads, and then if you look below, you can't see them at all. It's covered by all of the weft yarns. And then when it's covered 100%, it's said to be weft-faced. And tapestry weaving is a good example of this. And now on to warp-faced weave. And if the warp covers the entire weft, so only the warp is seen, so you just see the warp threads, you don't really see the thread going through from side to side, it's said to be warp-faced. Inkle weaving and tablet weaving are a good example of warp-faced weaving. And now I'll show you the 4 different types of looms I have with me and explain a little about them. I have a tapestry loom with me. It's not that big, but it's very small actually, but this is a variety of different types of tapestry looms. And tapestry weaving is one of the oldest forms of woven textile, tracing back to Babylon, Persia, Egypt, India, and ancient Greece. Tapestries were even found on the Parthenon walls. Not only did tapestries enrich and enhance the environment and add warmth to castle walls, but they recorded myths and historic events as well. Tapestry weaving is ideal for weaving pictorial or geometric designs. In tapestry weaving, each color of the weft weaves only in its own area. This is called discontinuous weft because the weft doesn't travel all the way across. So sometimes you can end up with slits in tapestries, but most of the time those are sewn up after the tapestry comes off the loom. So there's a little extra work involved. A tablet weaving loom, which is probably most people have not seen before. It's kind of an obscure type of weaving, but I find it really interesting. And bands are quite ancient from every culture. A band is a long, narrow weaving used for belts, bindings, animal halters, and trim. And tablet weaving, also known as card weaving, is an ancient type of band weaving that uses a set of tablets or cards for the production of the shed. Tablet weaving is a twined structure, so meaning the warp threads are twisted around the weft threads by the action of the tablets. The tablets can be made of any suitable stiff material. In fact, in ancient times, they were made of bone or wood. And most are often square with a hole punched in each corner. Each of the holes carries a warp thread, and the tablets are usually arranged in a pack. The shed is changed when the tablets revolve around their center point like a wheel. And I have 2 tablet weaving looms here I can show you, and you'll see that. Tablet can be turned forward or backward as a pack or individually, and can be manipulated in other ways, making many weave structures possible. These are almost always warp-faced, with the warp threads either twining with the weft or interlacing with it. The earliest tablet weaving examples come from Germany, found in a royal burial ground dating to the 6th century BC. There are also fragments of tablet woven fabric found in a grave in Athens, Greece, dated from the late 3rd of the 5th century BC. So pretty ancient. And now on to the Inca loom. It's a simple loom designed to weave warp-faced bands. Easy to set up, although it doesn't look it, it actually is. They're very portable. In fact, I brought my Inca loom to the library for the Yarn Lovers Support Group. I also have a small inkle, which I have with me, that I've actually woven in the car as a passenger. The Inca loom uses string heddles that separate warp threads in order to create 2 different sheds. The warp threads can also be manipulated by hand in order to create more intricate weavings. And now the rigid heddle. Rigid heddle looms have been found in archaeological digs dating back to Roman times, which actually I found was pretty surprising for me. I didn't know they were that old. So the Museum of Antiquities in Newcastle University in England has in its collection a Roman rigid heddle that was made of bone slats bound together at the top and bottom with sheep bronze, which you'll actually see in the picture. Originally, rigid heddle looms were very small, but over the years they've grown as technology has been able to make them bigger. And on rigid heddle looms, the beater is combined with the heddles. The heddles have holes drilled in the rigid material, and it also acts as a warp spacer and a beater. Traditionally, wood or bone was used. Now they are usually made of plastic, and the warp spacing aspect of this type of loom helps to create the balanced weave I talked about. And that ends the little PowerPoint presentation. And if anyone has any questions, I'm open to questions. If not, any questions? Okay. I'd like to share my favorite weaving references from the book Circe. When I was reading it, I tried to highlight everywhere where they mentioned loom, weave, anything. And I think I got all of them. I actually have a list. But my favorite 3, I did read one of them, but I'll read it again, from page 155, is, if I had had Athena's skill, I could have woven a great tapestry of Iris, goddess of the rainbow, flinging down her colors from the sky. But I was not Athena. I was happy to make simple scarves with cloaks and blankets that lay like jewels upon my chairs. And I like this passage because I feel like I'm about at that same level. I'm happy to make scarves and shawls and table runners and towels. And I just find it wonderful to be able to turn thread into fabric. I find it amazing. But I'm really fascinated by it. So my second favorite passage is on page 312. I watched the sun rise at my loom. And I think that, to me, means that weaving can be very meditative. And I find it enjoyable to weave in the early morning with just your yarn, your loom, and your thoughts. Because it can be a very, very solitary hobby. But I find it, the repetitive nature is very soothing. But at the same time, there are aspects of it that that really make you think, and you have to figure things out, and you have to figure out yardage or numbers, and I find that really interesting too. And I think that's what attracts me to it. There's so much you can do. There's so many different types of looms. I found from the beginning, when I started, I thought, oh, you just have to have a floor loom. Well, no, you don't. I've been that route, and yes, they're very nice, but I like weaving on the more portable types, and I find them a little simpler, and they're a lot less setup work. The floor looms is a lot of setup work with getting all your warp yarns ready and strung up the right way, and then you can just play and weave. But warping it can take days, you know. These, it might take an hour to warp it up, maybe a little longer with the rigid heddle, but and they're more accessible. They're less expensive, so I'd say they're accessible for your average person. But and on to my last favorite quote from the book, from page 346. Life is not so simple as a loom. What you weave, you cannot unravel with a tug. And yet every loom is not simple, as you will see. And now I'd like to just give you a little bit of my personal weaving history. And I was always interested in fiber arts, as I'm a knitter and a crocheter. And about 8 years ago, someone I knew mentioned they were taking weaving lessons. And I was really intrigued and began researching hand weaving by checking out weaving books from the library. I'm a huge library user, and that's the first place I go to look to find any information. And if I really like a book I got from the library, then I will buy it for my own collection. So I checked out books from the library, and I watched YouTube videos. And soon I bought a rigid heddle loom and began weaving. I'll show you my first weaving. Not pretty, but it's nice to look back from where you started. And then I took lessons at the American Textile History Museum in Lowell, Mass. And I learned to weave on a 4-shaft Dorset loom, which is a very small, about the size of my rigid heddle, small foldable loom. And my teacher was a member of the Boston Weavers Guild. In fact, I'll show a sample. This is the sample that I wove on that small loom. It did take me a couple of lessons just to get it strung up, and then I got to play around with different patterns. You can see they look slightly different. And that was just varying. On a floor loom, you have what they call treadles, and that helps you pick the different sheds. And so you get a lot more variation in your shed with the treadles. So that was my first 4-shaft weaving. Pretty proud of that one. It came out pretty good. And then I also learned about inkle weaving from the weaving instructor in Lowell, and from there to tablet weaving. And I've also liked tapestry weaving, so I learned that type of weaving also. And I love the patterns you can make in tablet weaving and inkle weaving. And tapestry weaving I like because you can make pictorial or freeform weaving, which I've done. And then you can do many types of weaving with the 2-shaft rigid heddle, which I have over there, from a simple balanced weave to complex repeating patterns to there is a very intuitive type of weaving, style of weaving called saori, which originated in Japan. And they usually just, they'll warp it up with like a black or a white plain warp, and they'll choose their yarns that they want to weave with based on color or texture and whatever they feel like weaving at the time. So it's very intuitive. You know, if you feel like purple today, you'll weave purple, and as opposed to following a very rigid pattern, which you can do also. So it can go from one extreme to the other. If you like really free-form stuff, you can do that. If you like really rigid, beautiful patterns, you can do that too. So, and I like the rigid heddle loom because it doesn't take up as much floor space as a 4-shaft loom. And it's less expensive. And then now I'm going to show you some of the samples I have with me. So if it's okay, we can shut this off. This is, it's not pretty, but this is the first thing I ever wove on the rigid heddle. You can see it's a balanced weave because you can see both the warp threads, the white, and the blue or the orange is the weft. This is also another rigid heddle. I was experimenting with what they call clasped weaving. You have two different colors and you can go as far across as you want and make different designs. It's kind of fun. And here I have samples of when I did have a 4-shaft loom, I wove kitchen towels. Very long. I had 8 kitchen towels out of this one warp. And so I just used different colors, different treadlings. And I also did these. These are just very simple plain weave table runners. But you can see how the colors kind of interweave. You don't really get a green, you don't get a yellow, you kind of get a mix. And I really like that. This is cotton. This is, I think, 5/2 cotton. There's weaving terminology in when you buy your weaving yarns, and it all runs by size. But you can also weave with knitting yarns, which I'm doing over here. But I'm going to show you some more samples first. This is a little loom that I wasn't originally going to display, but I thought I'd bring it. It's called a zoom loom. And this is a pin loom, very small. It was popular in the 50s, and it's kind of had a resurgence. And I also brought books that I really got a lot of information from. Pin loom weaving. I got this from the library. It's got a lot of great information. And then you end up with these small little squares. But you can also sew them together. I made a cover for my Kindle by just putting 6 squares together. And then these I thought were really cool. I started with just a plain weave, very loose. And then after I took it off the loom, or actually might have been before, I went in with a supplemental purple thread and made a little design on it. So you could get very creative, just making very simple little squares and then weaving different designs in them, and then you could make it as big as a blanket if you want. So I find, being able to start small and then take it wherever your mind can take you with weaving. So let's see. So the sample's there. This is my little tiny little tapestry loom, which I'll be demonstrating in a minute. And you can make little tapestries. So actually, this is a sample out of this book that I got. She gives you step-by-step lessons to make this in this book. And this is another great tapestry weaving book that I own. But my love is the band weaving looms. And you can do a lot. This is one of I made this into a guitar strap. I did this on the ankle. This is one of those weaves I was talking about where you manipulate the warp threads by hand. So I had to go in and pick up all those yellow threads to make that pretty design. But then this is ankle woven. And once I had it all strung up, I didn't have to think about it. I just wove back and forth. And I make keychains out of them. And then this is also ankle woven, but I took a band and I sewed it together. There's 4 lengths here, 1, 2, 3, 4. And I made a pretty bag out of it. So you're not limited to the width. You can sew them together. And I'd like to show you some ankle books that I think are really good. This is a great book, Ankle Pattern Weaver's Directory. And this one I just got the other day. This lady does these awesome guitar straps. She's from New Mexico, and she loves color. It's amazing the colors she can get in her. And it's a very simple loom, but she loves to design with color and pattern. And she doesn't worry about big looms. She's just all about bands. Let's see. I think now, onto tablet weaving, which is this monstrosity here. I made this loom. This is just to hold the two ends tight. Anything you have that will hold them tight, because you just want to hold your warp threads under tension. And here are my tablets. And then they turn, and I will demonstrate that. But this is one of the tablet looms. Here are the tablets. They come in different sizes. You can even make them out of a pack of playing cards. And you can get very intricate weavings out of this. This was just a simple sampler that I did, that I made into a ukulele strap. And I've made even very small, thin things made into bracelets. And actually, on this side, I'll show you. I even made it into trim for a jacket. And actually, if you've ever been to any Viking reenactments or such, they like to put a lot of trim on their clothes, and that's where I got this idea. A lot of tablet weavers will do like Viking reenactments or very medieval type reenactments. And a lot of them use the trim. Back in the Viking days, they did that to embellish their clothing. And they did that with tablet woven bands. So, just a few more samples. This was originally a belt that I sold to a friend, and then she wanted keychains made out of it. So I made 5 keychains, and this was what's left over. So, and this was the last tablet woven thing I made. It was very complicated, but I love the way it came out. It is got 4 different colors in it, and if you look, it'll go red, yellow, green, blue, and then yellow, red, blue, green. And so this was a very, very complicated pattern that I had, but I love the way it turned out.
How long would something like that take?
Oh, well, first you have to string up all the tablets. That might take you a day, or maybe a couple hours. Depends if you've got cats helping you like I do, they tend to make the process a little longer. And then I would usually only weave like an hour or 2 at a time. I'll show you the pattern for this. That was a pattern that I actually followed. And it's very... So this is the pattern. And this tells you which tablets to turn and how to turn them forward and back. So you really have to pay attention, because every once in a while something will change. And then if you turned it forward and it was supposed to go backwards, and you have to go. So it takes a while until you get the hang of it. But I love this. That's how it looks. So I thought now I would actually weave. Now that you've seen, just a couple more samples. And these I wove on the rigid heddle loom. This is my first shawl. And actually, you see that? Oh, it was up on the screen, the picture with this on the loom. And then it took me about 4 hours to do all of these one snowy day, to twist all of those to make the fringe. But I only used knitting yarn for this. This is made out of woolies and a little sock yarn that I doubled because it was really thin. But I wanted like a very subtle stripe in it. And then I made this for my spouse who wanted very bright. So I used a very bright variegated yarn and made this. And again, with the twisty on the end. I believe that's all the samples now. So I'm going to start with the smallest loom. Again, that is the tapestry loom. And with this, these are the only tools I have. This helps me get the shed. This is the shuttle that holds all the yarn. And this is my little tiny beater. So I've already put this through the shed. I turn it on its side, and I put the shuttle through. I have to leave a little extra yarn because it's going to go up and down and over. And then I beat it in. Then if I wanted to make any other design, I could start another yarn. Like, see the white here? I started just a patch of white. I'm like, well, I think I'll just, I have this bag of leftover yarn that I do little tapestries with. And I love bringing this to the Yarn Weavers support, the Yarn Lovers support group at the library because it's so portable. And basically, you just pick the shed back and forth with the needle. You just go over, under, over, under, over, under. So it's your very simple weaving that you perhaps have done in grade school with paper or any other type of thing. It's your basic over, under, over, under. But you can make pictures with it. Like I was just trying to do kind of landscapey type of thing here, rolling hills, and my son came out kind of wonky, but it is kind of wonky, but it was really fun to just play with the color. And I think that's what excites me most about weaving.
But Lisa, how did you do just the portion like the white, and then go to another color?
Well, I'll do a little purple, and I'll show you. Instead of going all the way across, I'm only going to go part way. So I'm only going to put this in here. So it's only going to work its way across that way. So now I want to go back. I'm only going to go back under those yarns that I originally went over. And then you can go back and forth just in that little space and build it up as much as you want. And then you could start another color in the middle if you wanted. Now, sometimes if you don't interlace them with the one that's got the other color, you will end up with a slit. But at the end, you can, when you take it off, you can sew that up with just thread. Or there's ways you could just start your other weft. Before you went and did a whole bunch up here, you could just do one line, start the other line here, and kind of do them both at the same time. And you could go around the same warp thread with both the white and the purple, and it would interlock like that. So does that answer your question?
It does, yeah.
Okay.
I was wondering where the thread went. I mean, did you run it below or?
Yeah, and then on the end, you have lots of ends
Right.
in the back. You can either thread them in with a needle, or I just tie them in a knot. I'm kind of lazy. You can see here, there's little knots in the back. But if I hadn't shown you, you wouldn't have known. So, but that is my simplest loom, and it's probably hard for you guys to see, so I'm not going to do much more on that one. But you can build it up. You can even, what they do with bigger looms, they put a picture behind it, what they call a cartoon. And it's like a line drawing. And you would put that behind, like here, And so when you got to where the line was, you knew it was time to start another color. So you could kind of follow that pattern that's underneath with your yarn colors. And that's how they do like pictorial tapestries and such. Me, I just like playing with shapes and colors. So to me, it's a very simple loom. But you can get very, very fancy with it. And that's not where my heart lies. My heart lies more with the bands, which I will show you now. This is an Inca loom. Looks very complicated. It's very, very simple. It is opened on one side, so you can actually string all the warp yarns very easily. And you put one warp yarn on, and then you put another one on, and string a heddle through it. One set with the heddles goes over the top bar, the other set goes through, and then the rest winds around the pegs. Actually, and that's for length. They actually have big floor Inca looms that are like this tall with maybe a dozen more pegs. So you can, it would just go back and forth, and it's circular. So I'm just going to move some of this out of the way. It's circular, so when I start weaving and I get up here and I have no more room, this is a only moving part on this loom is the tension rod. You loosen it up and you're able to move the warp because it's circular. It's not actually attached to any of them. It's just riding around the pegs. So as you weave, my weaving is going to start coming around, and when it gets to about here, I run out of room. But this is a very easy loom to use. It is, I'll put this down here. It's only comprised of two sheds, and you manipulate it with your hand. Sorry. This would be better for me this way. There's one shed. By pushing these threads down, I get one shed. And by pushing them up, I get the opposite shed. So now I will weave. Make this a little tighter. You always want your warp threads under tension. And this is a little belt shuttle. It's got a little bevel here on the edge, and that helps beat in the weft. So I'll beat it in. Going to change sheds. Going to beat again. So you do a lot of beating. I'm going to pull that through. And that's all there is to inkle weaving. Once you get it all warped up, it's very easy. You just go back and forth. I can make it, you don't want it to fall off the end of the pegs, but you actually could put rubber bands on the pegs so your warp yarns don't fall off. So I could make it wider. And if you look here, how wide this is, look at how wide my band is. It's because I'm pulling it, the weft very tight so you won't see it. And that's what makes the band so very strong. Can everybody see okay? And these looms probably go for around 100, maybe as much as 150, but you can get them cheaper. You can even build them yourself. If you got a handy person in your household, I'm sure they could take a couple of 2x4s and some dowels and make one for you. And I think that's what I love about weaving is I find it can be very accessible. And that's why I love the smaller looms, because, you know, this was maybe $20, $30. I could make one myself by taking 4 pieces of wood, making a square, and putting nails in it, you know, measuring out where to put the nails, and I could make that. I made that one. You could make this. You could make something like this. In fact, there is a pattern online by this very famous tapestry weaver, Archie Brennan, and he has a pattern to make a plan to make a tapestry loom out of copper pipe. So you could go and to Home Depot, go pick up some copper pipe and get his plan, and you could make your own tapestry loom. From here to really big, you can use like gas pipe too, really big pipe. So that is the Inkaloom. Anyone have any more questions about the Inkaloom? And this is like a mini Inkaloom. This is one I take in my car with me. Not while I'm driving, just passenger. But this I actually have warped up with tablets. These tiny little things are my tablets. And depending on how I turn the tablets, I can get different designs. Like I can get chevrons. I'm not sure you can all see that, or I can get just arrows. And the arrows, I just turn them all in the same direction, and I keep going forward. The chevron, these other pattern, I turn 4 forward and 4 back. And then if I turn forward 8 times and then backwards 8 times, I could get different designs. So once you're all warped up, which can be a little tedious with the tablets because you've got to put 1 warp thread in each hole. Once you're all warped up, it's a lot of fun. And on this, my pattern is pretty high, so I'm going to move this so you can see how this moves. All the yarns are moving around. And then I tighten up the tension. And I usually use one of these because if your tablets get out of alignment and they get all messed up, it's a nightmare. Not so much with this pattern. This one I have all my tablets marked A, B, C, D, and I know my home space, all the D's are going to be closest to me, so I know I'm good. And this is the beater I like to use for my tablet weaving. It's an old letter opener. It's not very sharp, but just enough that it's good to beat in. Because sometimes the sheds aren't terribly big, I like to wind this is what I use for a shuttle. And sometimes I've seen people use a thimble full of thread too. But I just take a little dowel, cut a notch, and wind my yarn around it. And say, this is how the sheds change. So here's my shed. I'm going to go forward. And now I have a new shed. And sometimes to clear, what they call clear the shed, you're going to move your cards back and forth. And your shed is the space in between your 2 cards. Your upper and lower holes, sorry. Now I'm going to pull that tight. And again, I'm going to go forward. So I was going to go forward 4 turns, and then backward 4 turns. And that'll give me one design. But if I wanted to keep going forward, I could keep going forward and get a different design. But on something like the Inkaloom, as you turn these cards, they twist. And so if I kept going forward, I'd be getting a lot of twist up here. So what I like to do on the Inkaloom is do a very a pattern where I would go forward and backward, so it would twist and then untwist. And I like doing that on the ankle. Something where you have lots of twists that you wouldn't be able to reverse, I would do on something like this. Because at this end, it's not attached. This is just free. And so I can take all the twist out by hand if I want to. If it twisted up too much down here near the cards, I can take all the twist out and then reattach it up here. But I can't do that with that because that's all attached in a circular fashion. This is more linear. But this works in the same way. Bring this over here. In fact, I even have another one that I built, and I use it as I use a weight at the end of the warps. It's another type of warp-weighted loom. I just hang a 5-pound dumbbell off the end, and it's enough weight to keep these strings under tension, and it helps when you want to untwist. And I like to keep these all in order because I have had mishaps where something happened and they got all out of order and they get very, very tangled. But on this loom, you can see I was weaving it all in one direction, and then I decided to do forward and backward. So I went forward, and then I went backward. I get the little diamond shape. So that's what I find fascinating. Depending on how you manipulate your yarns, you can get a totally different pattern. And this, again, is very similar. You turn your cards. And I like this because now they're going to sit flat on there, and they're not kind of floating like this one. Because sometimes when they're floating, if you happen to touch one, it might turn by accident. These, a little easier. Although with this loom, you have a little trouble with the twist at the end. So I'm looking for my beater. There we go. Now, if you're a beginning weaver, I probably wouldn't recommend tablet weaving to start with because it can get a little complicated. If you like bands, I would definitely recommend an ankle loom because then if you want to do tablets, you can do simple tablet weaving on it also. And the rigid heddle, which I'm going to go to next. And then is also something that I would recommend for a beginner or even a small tapestry loom or the zoom loom. But tablet weaving, I would definitely wait. You can also turn them backwards, and you can also split the packs up. I have 16 tablets here, so I can split the tablets up and do one pack forward and one pack backward. And that's how I get the diamond shape like that. So it can get a lot more complicated, but I'm not going to bore you with all the intricacies of it. But there are some very good books out there. I'll show you. This was like people considered like the Bible to tablet weaving. This was written, I think, in the 80s. It's a very good book. But everything's in black and white, which is a little disappointing. There's lots and lots of different patterns. This book I got from a lady in Germany, and it's full of color. And it's in German and English. One side of the page is German, one side is English. And she's got wonderful colors, and there's let's see. There's got to be like 13 different kinds of tablet weaving that you can do, and she's got them all in here. It's kind of a hard book to get at the moment because everybody's weaving at home. but if you ever get a chance to see it, it's a great book. Claudia Wolny. She's got a few other tablet weaving books I recommend her highly. And rigid heddle weaving. The library has this one. I got it out, and I loved it so much I bought my own copy. This is a great book for rigid heddle weaving, which is what I'm going to show you now, which is the last loom that I have. Now this is a rigid heddle loom. It is 32 inches wide, which is the widest you can go, which is how I got my shawl, my nice blue shawl was so big. You can get them as small as 8 inches wide, which is made for sampling. Say you wanted to make something big, but you weren't sure about the color combination or something. You could take your rigid heddle, the 8-inch, and make a little sample, and then you could see how the colors work out. Or you could just get something that small, like this is only 9 inches wide. I don't need this big loom, but I like the to be able to make something big. But if you're a beginner, I would suggest Shacked sells a loom called the Cricket rigid heddle, and they are 15 inches wide or 8 inches wide. And they're very easy to learn with. They're made out of plywood, very sturdy, and they're great for beginners. So that's something you might like to look into. Now with a rigid heddle, it's a 2-shaft loom, and the magic happens because of the rigid heddle. It's got slots and holes. So you have 1 yarn in each slot and 1 yarn in each hole. So when you move this rigid heddle, the yarns in the holes move. So when I put it in the down position, all the holes are down. These just kind of float there. When I put it in the up position, the holes are up. But I get another shed. These are just kind of floating there. And it also is a beater, so I don't need a separate beater. I just beat it in like that. So I will show you. Put in the down position. This is a stick shuttle. Actually, I made these the other day out of a yardstick. I drilled a hole, cut a few straight lines, sanded it down, and I got a great stick shuttle. Because the stick shuttles that came with this one are 32 inches long. I didn't want a big long one, so I made something a little smaller. And what I do is I make sure that I don't have like a lot of excess on the edge, because then it'll stick out a lot. But I leave a little bit of material to get pushed in. So I push that in. And now I'm going to put the heddle in the other position. Now we're going to be in the up position. So I'm changing sheds. And if anyone has any questions, you're welcome to ask me. Now this is slower than, say, a floor loom where you would use the boat shuttle, because the boat shuttle is got a spindle full of thread, and you would like toss it back and forth because they're pretty short. And on floor looms, you're typically weaving wider, so you kind of throw it and it glides along the bottom threads. This you kind of really place. So there's different tools for different types of weaving, and so you might have come across some of them, but maybe not all of them. So, and I see this is a little floppy, so I'm going to tighten the tension just a little bit. So I find this very relaxing. But at the same time, when I'm done, I have this great thing that I can wear or give away or just show off, or, you know. And this yarn I bought for knitting, and I knitted a scarf. I like it, but I had leftover yarn, so what do I do with it? It's perfect. I can weave anything I want. Any color. I got lots of I got anyone that's a knitter, it's great for you. You always got a big stash of yarn. So, you know, and I just put a very simple thin warp on, so if I wanted, I could change partway through and change to something very sleek and shiny, or I could stay with my wool and make a nice jewel tone scarf. Or this could be a small table runner, or I could take it off and sew up the sides and make a bag out of it and put an ankle strap on it. So, and does anyone want me to continue with the rigid heddle loom? Yes? Because I do have one other quick loom. Well, it's not a loom. I just want to show how. I'm very excited about weaving. Anybody can weave. This was in a copy of Shuttle, Spindle, and Die Pot magazine, which is the Hand Weavers Guild of America's magazine. And you can even weave on a CD. Anybody can do it. I just have some white thread, white yarn, very thin, and I made spokes. See, on the back? And then I just started, and you can vary it. You can go over and under, or you could go over 2 and under 1, over 2, under 1, and make different designs. So you could do that. You could start weaving just like this.
Did you make notches in the edges?
Nope, I just kind of taped them into place. So, because I found that they moved around a lot, and but when I'm done, you won't, you know, I can hang that up, or I could weave both sides.
Or you have to leave it on.
Yeah.
Of course, otherwise you cut them.
Yeah, but you know, I could hang this up in my window or something, or use it as a coaster or something. But I know, I hope my enthusiasm comes across. I just find weaving very exciting and very accessible if you know where to look. And the first place I looked was my library, and I find that's the best resource, even if you only just get clues of where else to look. So, and I'll just, I know our time's almost up. I'll just finish weaving, and if you have any questions, just ask. I can even show you, I brought another color. I can show you this clasp weft technique that I was talking about. Let's see. I'll do this. So I'm going to string this up in here. So this one's going to grab this yarn. Actually, let me try that again. I haven't done this for a while, so maybe I won't demonstrate that. I'll just keep weaving.
But you just captured our.
I capture this, and then let me see if I can do it. I'll try, but I'm sorry if I haven't. Here we go. Here we go. So now I'm like halfway and halfway. Yeah. I'm going to capture this again. And pull this through again. Yep, nope, I undid it, sorry. I'm going to give up on that. I haven't done that in a while, but you can join the two and make a design, but it's obviously a little more complicated than I remember. Yep. And I think I'm kind of done with that because I just broke my yarn. But I will show you if you wanted to. Yes?
Do you do most of your stuff just freehand patterns?
Yes. Rigid heddle, yes. Tablet weaving, I tend to follow a pattern because that can be very complicated. Even if I just thread it from the pattern and then I can, like this one, I can turn it in forward direction or backward direction depending on, but I do usually look back at the pattern because I find tablet weaving to be the most complex type of weaving that I do. And so I really do follow pattern with that. Yep, there's my shuttle. With my ankle loom, I follow a pattern, but I could make that myself. Like I'm like, okay, I want red here and white here, and or I'll look at the book and
Get more inspiration than actually mimicking something.
like here, depending on what type of design you want, it'll give you the pattern, which is definitely not as complex as the tablet weaving pattern I showed you. On the rigid heddle, actually, I have done all freehand. I just like mixing colors.
You must have a good eye.
Um,
Try something like that.
But I own a color wheel. It's that artists use, and I try to maybe do complementary colors or analogous colors, or so I do use a color reference. So don't say I'm not like I don't have an innate eye. I do use books a lot, and I find that's the best resource. That and somebody that knows how to weave. Like I took weaving lessons from a weaver at the American Textile History Museum, which sadly has been closed since, but it was a great place. But there are lots of resources online. There are weavers' guilds. The weavers' guilds around here tend to concentrate more on floor looms. They're not so much into band looms or rigid heddle so much, which is why I don't actually belong anymore, because I like the smaller looms. They're a lot about floor looms and very complex patterns. So, any other questions? Did that answer your question? Okay.
One of the bands behind you. Is that silk?
This
On the
this here,
on the ankle.
this.
Yeah.
These are all crochet cotton. It's cheap. And that's what and it's cheap and it's strong. So you don't have to spend a lot of money. I think weaving can be accessible to anybody, and you don't have to buy a big floor loom. I thought that at first, and I did go and buy them, and I have since sold them because I enjoy these smaller ones because you can do a lot with them. You can't make huge yardage, although this is pretty close. I just love the intricacy of bands, and you can do so much with them. I make keychains, I make ukulele straps, guitar straps. You can make lanyards. I make trim. That's about it. And I think that's.
Do you take orders?
I do not take orders because I have worked in a factory before, and I know what production is like. And I really enjoy working at my own pace. And once I complete something, if I want to sell it, I will. Like I do at Christmas time. I made probably 50 of these, just from different bands. I can probably get 5 or 6 out of a band from the Inkle loom. And I bought the hardware, and I put them together, and I sell them at Christmas or give them as gifts, you know. But not until I finish. I don't really like to take orders because it's too much like factory production work. Yeah, it takes all the fun out of it. So, but I have made and I have sold, but only after I've made something. Someone goes, oh, I love it. I'm like, here, you can, I'll sell it to you or I'll give it to you. I've given away a lot of stuff too. So, I mean, it's not something that I plan to make money on. If it might pay for some of the yarn, okay. But I really get the enjoyment out of the process and looking at the beautiful result. But, you can make it as mindless or mindful as you want, and it doesn't have to be expensive. So I think it's accessible to everybody, and I hope I kind of shared that enthusiasm for it.
Thank you. Yes, thank you.
Thank you.